And I knew.
Go ahead. I'm testing. You guys, it's going to be a little bit, maybe 3 or 4 more minutes. Say hello, Sue Ann. Look at Sue Ann. She said, don't put her on here.
No.
She's going to whoop me, y'all. I started it early just to make sure I had everything connected, so you guys can just wait. Hey, Deborah. We're live, so let me know. Sorry to have started so early, but I had to check this out, check the connection and everything. And please share it if you don't mind. If you could share the video. Hey, Pam. Started out a little early, Pam, just to make sure I got everything right. Hi, Beth. In a moment, I will be quiet. Can you guys hear okay? Yes, it's okay. We're live. I was just talking to them. It's gotcha. Can you guys hear okay? Before they get started, can you hear me okay? Thank you, Pam. Hey, Carla.
What you need? You got jump rope? You want it outside?
Hey, Tim. Hey, Carla. Just a few more minutes. Hey, Karen. Like just a few more minutes, Karen. And I'm freehanding this hold on this camera, so I had to use my stand for a backup. So if it's a little jittery, sorry, but at least you'll be able to hear what's going on. Yeah, I can sit better with the lights on too. You're most welcome. I warn y'all, this live video is going to be a little shaky though. But we got old Trusty right here. It's a backup.
Testing.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lori Flinsky. If you don't know me, I'm a broker of White Oak Realty. I've been a broker here in the county for 26 years, so I've watched our taxes go up and down. And this is something that I've had so many phone calls and people that are upset, and I really didn't have answers for everybody. So myself and a couple of others put this together just so everybody can ask questions, find answers. It's so broad, I don't really know if we're going to go tonight with this, but hopefully we leave here with some clarification for you. If it leads to the point where you feel like you want to make an appeal to your taxes, we'll help you understand how to do that. Anyway, so as we're going to go on tonight, Tracy Norman, where's Tracy? He's our District 5 Commissioner. He's going to help with running the meeting tonight. We also have Mr. Stan King. Hello. And he's with GMAS, the company that did the assessments, and Mr. Terry McCormick also. So they're ready for all of your questions, and hopefully we have lots of good answers for you. Other than that, Tracy, go ahead.
Appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Actually, a good crowd tonight. We're going to go through some things, try to explain some of the things that you're seeing on the assessments that came out, or the appraisal notices that came out. I don't know that we'll be getting deep into each individual property, so it's going to be somewhat of a broad brush about how it affected the county as a whole because of the time constraints. But what I do want to do is we're going to let GMAS talk about how the appraisals were done and everything. And one of the things you do need to remember is that the appraisal notice you got is not your tax bill. Your tax bill won't be out until late October, is that right, Ken?
Usually about late August, early September.
Okay, September. Because we haven't set the millage rate yet. We don't know what that millage rate is going to be. We know that the values have gone up, so the millage rate can definitely come down some to compensate for that. I think the school board's got to face the same decision because they do the same thing with their budgets and their millage rates. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Terry and Stan.
All right.
Here, taking it.
Sure.
All right, great.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good evening. Thank y'all for coming. I hope what to explain is, like Commissioner said, who we are, how we got involved, why we done the reassessment, what the reassessment is, the notices, explain the assessment notice you got in the mail, and to appeal that if you wish to appeal it, how to appeal it. I've got a real quick 3-minute video. If you don't mind, don't fall asleep sitting through it, watch the video, and I got about 10 slides on PowerPoint, and I'm going to open it up for discussion. Again, I'm not going to talk on specific individual properties. I'll talk about scenarios, but your individual property will need to be discussed with an appraiser in Ken's office, the tax assessor's office. Make sure everything's fair, equal, and uniform. But I'll start with a video. Now, I apologize, this is not for Oglethorpe County, but it's a generic video for all counties. So it just has, this was kind of a quick meeting put together. So this is for Dade County, Georgia. I don't know if anybody knows where Dade County is. It's very northwest county and state.
There's a lot of misunderstanding of the role of appraisers and how they affect the property tax that homeowners pay. When someone hears the term appraiser, they seem to think of a scary figure reaching for their wallet. Not so. Appraisers don't set tax rates. Appraisers don't chase tax dollars. An appraiser is interested in fairly determining property values, and they take great pride in it. Property tax is determined by a simple formula. Appraisers only affect one of these variables, the value, and they do so with incredible accuracy. Appraisers aren't tax collectors or even tax setters. They're just fellow taxpayers, and their primary goal is to make everything fair and equitable. Imagine that you are in a restaurant with two friends. One orders a hot dog, one a plate of caviar, and you order a steak. The waiter comes to the table with a total bill of $100, but he doesn't know how much each of you should pay. If everyone paid the same amount, the guy who ordered caviar might be happy. But what about the guy who ordered a hot dog? Enter appraisers. The food is your property. Just like these meals, some people's property is worth more than others. And it's the appraiser's job to determine how much each property is worth. That's it. So, in the same way the value of these menu items would need to be determined, an appraiser places values on properties to ensure fairness and equity. After the appraiser determines the value of each property, local governing bodies will set their budgets for the coming year. They set the tax rate in order to produce the dollars needed for their budgets. The value of a property does not affect the amount of property tax needed. The sum total of all these budgets is a set number that has to be divided up among all the property owners. So even if everyone's value was cut in half by the appraisers, the tax rate would be raised in order to generate the same amount of tax revenue. The appraisers don't determine the taxes you pay. They just determine the values of properties to keep everything as fair and equitable as possible. When you notice a change in your property's appraised value, the change is the result of a never-ending quest for fairness and accuracy. Appraisers are graded on their performance, so there is a detailed system to get accurate valuations. First, the appraiser looks at similar properties that have sold, their sale prices, and the terms and conditions of each sale. That's the reason your home won't just be compared to the place next door. Studying things like square footage, age, and location helps appraisers determine how comparable another property is to yours. Even seemingly small details, like an extra bathroom or finished basement, can result in significant differences in value in two otherwise identical homes. Appraisers maintain a thorough database of real estate information to make this process as precise as possible. Changes in value are typically the result of local real estate market sales or major changes to a property. Remodel a kitchen or finish your basement, and your property's value could increase. When you see your home's appraised value, you can rest assured that the number has not been drawn out of a hat, nor generated with anything but equity and accuracy in mind. Long story short, appraisers are here to help, not trying to hinder. Their focus is accurate values, not tax collection. The only things an appraiser chases are fairness and equity, and they take great pride in it.
So, like I said, my name is Stan King. I work with a company called GMAS. It's Georgia Mass Appraisal Solutions and Services. You can go to our website. It's gmas.net. It'll explain about the company. We work in many counties across the state. I think we're currently contracted in over 80 counties, 35 or 6 employees. We have several folks out in the field. Last year, to give you an idea, we're not just in Overmore County, we're in many counties. We actually field checked about 85,000 properties last year. So we assist the counties and for the assessor's office in situations where they may not have the funds to hire new appraisers or to go out and actually field visit properties. And so they either call us to assist them with those day-to-day operations or to help with values, uniformity, to help appeals, or when they're in a situation like Oglethorpe County was in, they have not maintained proper values compared to sales price. So what the state looks at is the sales prices of properties, and they compare the assessed values from the tax assessor's office, and they have a threshold that they have in between
36
that I'll
and
go
44.
over here in a minute. I got a couple slides on that to show you what they look at, the state looks at, and audits the counties. And so they'll usually call us when they get out of compliance and say, hey, can you help us reappraise the county? And so that's primarily what we're in the business to do. So to explain the property tax, the mass appraisal, and the appeals process, I threw this slideshow together, but I'm sure it may answer some questions, but it's probably going to strike even more questions. So we'll go through it real quick and then I'll just open it up. Some of you may already know, but property taxes funds everything locally here in the county. Funds the schools, roads and bridges, everything that's from your property tax bill helps. It doesn't go to another county, it goes to the state. It stays here in Oglethorpe County. The path of your tax dollars, you pay your tax bill to the tax collector, tax commissioner's office. Tax collector distributes it to the taxing authorities, which is the schools, the cities, and the county. And then those taxing authorities spend it for schools, hospitals, roads, bridges, fire departments. What makes up a tax bill is basically 3 things: the appraisal, the millage rate, and your tax bill. So we're part of that first step is the appraisal of the property. The state sets the level of assessment, which is 40%. Used to your automobile tax was taxed at 40%, but now they're on it. This stuff, sales tax type deal. But this is an ad valorem tax, so it's according to value. So we appraise the property, it's assessed at 40%. You multiply that assessment by the millage rate, and you'll receive a tax bill. Now that's a simplified version, no exemptions. There's several exemptions that you may apply for or already have: homestead, conservation use, senior exemptions, veterans. To create a millage rate, you have to have a budget. So the school boards, the taxing authorities will establish their budgets, what it's going to take to operate them for the next year. And then we form the digest. We, being the Board of Assessors, form the digest, all the net taxable properties in the counties. What's the total taxable digest? You divide the two and you calculate a millage rate. This is an example of how your tax bill is distributed amongst the taxing authorities. Now this millage rate I got from your 2018 certified millage rate. Total millage rate was 32.35 mills, but that's the county's portion of that makes up only about 30% of the total tax bill. The school board, of course, is the largest portion. And this is an example: if you were in a city, this would be the city portion. The Board of Assessors, their responsibilities and duties, they're appointed by the Board of Commissioners, the Board of Assessors, and they appoint the chief appraiser, and the chief appraiser hires the staff, and their goal is to make sure that all returned and unreturned properties are on the books for taxes at fair market value, and that it's appraised uniformly. Their next obligation is to make sure that you're receiving all the exemptions you qualify for. Now, they're not going to go and knock on everybody's door. The majority of the times they can publish things in the paper on their website, but you need to make sure that, one, go down to the assessor's office, that your records are correct, your value's correct, all the factual information is correct, and that you are receiving all the exemptions you qualify for. Now again, a part of the appraisal, this is where we assisted the county. We came in and we verified or collected all the information. We sent out folks all in the county. We got new photographs of all the properties. Came back in after collecting the data, analyzed the data, established a mass appraisal model, tested the model. It created values that was presented at the Board of Assessors meeting. They approved the values, but that's only half of the process. All right, so a reappraisal, it's two parts. One is the county's part as far as collecting, analyzing, and appraising the information that we have. Once we mail the notices, now it's the taxpayers' turn to appeal or don't appeal and tell us where we're wrong or where we might be missing data. You're going to, through the appeals process, give us information, whether you know it or not. You're going to give us information that's going to better define that mass appraisal model and to produce better values. So, for example, one person may appeal in a subdivision and we've realized, hey, that whole subdivision lot value might need to go from 20,000 a lot down to 10. Everybody in that subdivision will be affected. Or a neighbor comes in and says, hey, Billy Bob down the road has a finished basement. Well, guess what? We didn't know that, but we'll go field check it. We got this finished basement. So we'll get information like that through that appeals process. Now, this is a mass appraisal. It's not a fee appraisal. We didn't go out and fee appraise every single property. Had we done that, I don't believe the county could afford it, and we wouldn't be in business. But when you do appeal, it becomes more of a fee appraisal process. We look at your subject property and compare it to the most comparable properties. A mass appraisal model is basically appraising a mass of properties, a universe of properties, using common data, that's the technical term, standard methodology, and allowing for statistical testing. Now, there's a state mandated sales ratio analysis that they use, the Department of Audits and Accounts uses to grade and audit our values to compare them to the sales price. They also do independent appraisals and compare their appraisals to our assessments. We do our own internal appraisals, compare them to our assessments to make sure that all the sales are, or all of our values are close to the sales price, all of our appraisals are close to the sales price. And there's other publications that teach and train this. We're governed by the Department of Revenue, but a lot of the rules and regulations are adopted and published by the IAAO and GAAO. That's the International Association of Assessing Officials and the Georgia Association of Assessing Officials. The valuation process, there's three approaches to value. It's not just, we took the cost approach, which tends to be the highest value. We also looked at the market, properties that have sold, comparable sales. We also look at an income approach. If it's an income producing property, we can convert that income, that net operating income, into a value. So there's three approaches to value. I touched on this earlier. The audits and accounts, Department of Audits and Accounts are the ones that test the county's assessments to the sales price and their internal appraisals to make sure they're within the guidelines. The Department of Revenue then adopts their findings and either cites the county for being deficient or congratulates the county and lets them collect taxes. This is the tax assessment and appeal process. First is the property identification, data collection and analysis, the valuation, then the notices of assessment. That's where we're at now. The notices of assessments have been mailed, and we're within that 45 days of receiving your appeal if you're wishing to file an appeal. You've got 45 days to file that appeal. And then once all the appeals are final, the digest is submitted to the tax commissioners. The commissioners establish a budget, sets a millage rate, then you will receive a tax bill. The appeals process. If you don't file an appeal, nothing happens. The next thing you'll get is a tax bill in the mail, probably sometime in October or September. If you do file an appeal, what will happen is your appeals get submitted to the Board of Assessors. Now, the Board of Assessors probably aren't going to sit down and look at each one of the appeals. That's why they hired Kim. Kim and his staff, along with us, will be reviewing the appeals, collecting all the information from the appeals, making the adjustments or recommendations back to the Board of Assessors that say, we are too high here, we're too low here. We'll make those recommendations to the board. They'll accept them or deny them, and we'll probably mail out bulk 30-day notices. So what that means is, once we've analyzed all the appeals, we've made changes, we'll mail you a new notice, a revised notice, at a different value. You'll have 30 days to appeal that notice. If you don't appeal that notice, again, nothing happens. The next thing you'll get is a tax bill. If you do appeal that 30-day notice, it goes back here down to the Board of Equalization or an arbitration board or a hearing officer based on what you select. Now, the Board of Equalization is free to the taxpayers. If you appeal your property, you're not satisfied, you feel like it's worth less than what's on it, and you've got good evidence that you want to go fight that value, and we or the county don't change that value, we feel like we have enough evidence to defend our value, we're probably going to go to the Board of Equalization. That's part of the Clerk of Courts Authority, judicial side of the law. They establish and handle all the hearings. We'll be explaining our case, basically. Here's the subject, here's how we appraised it, here's why we think we're fair and uniform, and then the taxpayer will have their chance to explain why they feel like they're not fair and uniform, and then they'll make a decision. But it doesn't end there. If you're not satisfied, if the county's not satisfied, or the taxpayer's not satisfied, they can still go on to Superior Court. Now, we hope to resolve the majority of all appeals before even going to the Board of Equalization. But there's always going to be those cases where I think I'm right, you think you're right, let's see what these folks say. And that's where you'll go into the Board of Equalization. Usually, the county assessors adopts whatever the decision from the Board of Equalization is, and then that's typically the final value. The reasons you can appeal. There's only 4 reasons you can appeal your assessment notice. That's taxability, uniformity, value, and denial of an exemption. You can't appeal because it was a huge increase. The new appraisals weren't based on last appraisals. We were hired, the company was hired because we knew coming into it that the last year's appraisals were not correct or up to market value. So we didn't even consider what last year's values were. We came in with a fresh set of eyes, new data, took new photographs, analyzed the data, and established new appraisals. Some people's values went up, some of them went down. Not everybody's went up. So just make sure on the appeal, the reason of appeal is one of these reasons. Also, be prepared. If you feel like it's not worth what's on the notice, first make sure that all the facts are correct. Make sure to get a copy of your property record card. Look online, look at the data that the county has. Look at all the sales around you or comparable properties. Just make sure everything looks correct. If it is correct, you still feel it's high, go out and look for other comparable homes. Zillow, Realtor, find an appraiser or a realtor, broker. Bring in information to help your case to the assessors or to the Board of Equalization as to why you feel like your property is not worth that. Don't just put it too high. I mean, it's going to get put in a pile, and it'll probably just eventually go to the Board of Equalization, and we'll have that same discussion there. Well, if I had known what to bring into the hearing, I'd have been better prepared. That's all I have. Anybody got any questions? question or comment? Yes, sir.
You mentioned uniform. Did you base your appraisal on previous at all?
No, sir.
So then my farm, what's the question? So my farm, neglecting the value of the house, negating that, is exactly equal to the one across the road from them? Per acre?
I don't know. I don't have yours. I can't talk on specific properties, but it should be. Depends on the acreage, the class, the type, square footage.
I looked at 7 farms between my house and the next road, between 100 and 400 acres. Negating the value of the houses, any houses on that property, I was already 10.4% higher than the average. Why would that be? It's just farmland.
Well,
Farmland,
depending on the class and type of properties. If it's how many acres?
150.
Anything above 25 acres that's classified as agricultural property, above 25 acres is based on the soil productivity. How many acres is in woodlands? How many acres is in open land? How many acres of ponds or easements you might have? Because each soil productivity has a Department of Revenue soil rating, 1 through 9.
I looked at those numbers.
And they're identical?
Not identical, no.
Well, then,
But,
I'd have to look at them again. They should be comparable.
but let's strive for uniformity if that's what we're looking for.
Well, I agree.
And I don't have access to 2019. I was looking at 2018. So I'm sure everything that you did.
Well, let's look at 2019, because I have no information on the 2018.
Kim, when are we gonna get access to 2019?
Well, I mean, you can come by the office anytime.
Well, can't we get it on, I mean,
It won't,
everybody in the room can't come by.
it won't be online. It won't be online until.
Won't be online.
Until
Well,
those are certified.
how we gonna,
Those numbers,
uniformity, how we gonna fight uniformity?
come by the office.
Come by the office, everybody gotta come by the office. Did you appraise every piece of property in this county?
All taxable properties. All taxable properties. We didn't look at exempt.
Well, we're only talking about taxable property.
Well, you said all.
Well, okay, well, let me,
We didn't do personal property, we just did real
all right,
property.
well, let me ask you another question. Your contract says it's gonna be over a 3-year period, 1/3 each year. What happened there?
Let's start next year.
Oh, no, our
That's the
contract
maintenance-
was
the maintenance
total
contract.
reevaluation.
I saw a copy of the contract unless I.
That must be the new contract going forward to
It
maintain
was
it.
over a 3-year period, and I was told by other people it would be over a 3-year period. Now, I don't know.
Well, that's after these notices were sent out.
Roddy,
the new
that's to avoid
contract.
this.
Or that getting notices were sent out, y'all went back and reappraised the rest, I don't understand what you're saying.
No, sir, we were under contract. The contract that you've seen is not the contract that we were under when we done the reassessments.
Well, why can't we have access to that?
You can, I mean, it's all public record.
Yeah, well.
It was approved at the
You know,
commission meeting.
this county's been operating for a year undercover. Nobody knows what's going on in this county. Nobody knows that Billy Pitter, except a few, Billy Pitter got a $40,500 raise this year.
Stan, we gotta keep it to
Well,
tax
well,
balance.
I'm gonna talk, I got the floor.
But your concerns, I feel like, are not geared towards what the meeting was established.
But we,
And then there's open meetings, the commissioners meetings, they meet once a month. Their agenda's posted 24 hours before the meeting, or more than that. So, I mean,
in other words, we don't really have anything to fight unless we go by the office. Every one of us individually.
well, it depends on what you want to fight. Let me try to help explain where you need to go and who you need to see. If it's that type of argument, it won't be with the Board of Assessment.
There's gonna be an argument, we just need to know what it is.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I'm confused. Why can't we have access to 2019?
If they're not on the website yet, they won't be put on the website until they're certified, and that's gonna be after this process is complete. And that's, I mean, it's always been that way, right? It's just,
Okay.
yeah, they don't put numbers out there until they're certified, but they can change.
Well, then, you know, another thing, we don't know what our taxes is gonna be regardless of what our appraisal is,
That's
so
right.
we don't know what the millage rate is gonna be. So we're really, you know, spin our wheels like usual. Nothing unusual about this meeting.
Hey, thank you for holding this meeting. I'm Kathleen Crow. I'm down on Wolfskin, right in the waft of the chicken farm, which we've gotten used to since 2005. I think nobody here feels bad about, well, I'm gonna say, everybody is emotional paying taxes. And I bought a hot dog and I want caviar. So, I mean, everybody here knows that. So when I see this jump, I'll be down at the office tomorrow. Thank you.
Let me say this too, we encourage the appeals, if they're not what you assume them to be, please, I encourage you to go.
And we're glad
pull your
to help.
property
We're glad to
records
help
over, make
everybody.
sure all the information is correct.
We're there.
Kim can pull comparable properties and show you all the sales that we use.
Great, thank you.
Excuse me, let's move a little bit forward and come back for questions, because we're gonna jam up this whole meeting if everybody starts answering their questions right this minute. Let's have Tracy explain the millage rates, how that affects your actual bill, because your assessed value and your millage rates work together, and that's what creates your actual bill.
Well, I think that's pretty simple. If they change the millage rate, whatever that rate is, it's gonna be applied to what your assessed value is. We don't know that.
Well, I don't think everybody understands where the millage rates come from, so Tracy, I'll let you take that over for a minute.
I can do that. As most of you know, every summer, the Board of Commissioners sets the budget. And the budget will be set, really will start July timeframe through August. And I don't expect any big surprises in the budget this year. We'll have some cost of living increases, we'll have a little bit of healthcare costs, but it's not gonna be, what was it, 13.47 jump across the value of all the properties in the county. So to give you an idea, the properties in the county are just under $1,985 million. So the jump puts it about $1.1 billion. That is, with the county is not looking for that big of an increase. So what we'll do, we'll set the budget. A lot of the departments are going to set the budget exactly as it was last year. Some of them will probably ask for 1 or 2%. Once we get that, there'll be discussions back and forth. Do we need to add something? Does the fire department need more money to get our ISO rating down?
Yeah.
You know, do we need a new park over near Clark County? But there will be some things that we'll look at. Some things will be down, some things will be up. I believe this year, actually, the healthcare cost is pretty close. We did not get the increase that a lot of the counties got in the past year or so. But we'll set that budget. Once that budget's set, we look at the value of the digest once it's approved, and we've got to get it, there has to be less than 5% of, is it 5% of appeals? 8%. Well, okay, but it has to be 5% before the state will certify.
How much? 8%.
8%. Yeah. So once it can be certified, we'll take the value, we'll look at the budget, and the millage rate will be set to hit that budget. So the millage rate, if it was the current rate, which is 7,685, it's probably way above what we need to hit that budget. So we'll roll that number down to where it's at to hit the budget. Otherwise, we have to notify you that there's a major tax increase. And we have to publish it, and we get the phone calls and text messages and emails. Trust me, all of us have got a lot of, I think everybody on the board has at least a home. And I've got 2 pieces of property I have to pay tax on every year. I don't want mine going up any more than you do. But the values are definitely higher. So the millage rate will roll down. The school board's got to have a similar meeting and a similar discussion. They've got to set their budget and then adjust their millage rate to meet their budget. Otherwise, you get to call them and ask them why they're raising their taxes by 13%. Same thing goes for the cities. The cities will look at their millage rate, It's a much smaller population in each city, and I think there's only 3 that tax. It's Crawford, Lexington, and Arnoldville. So if you live in one of those cities, the same thing will happen with your city councils. They'll set the budget and then they'll adjust the millage rate. And I do.
Our budget starts January.
Oh, yours is January.
Our budget is already set.
So yours would change next year.
And then the option to change it.
Okay. Do you know if all cities are that way?
I don't know when Lexington or
Okay. All right, so that is one of the differences. The cities may adjust on a different calendar year if they're running, you know, June to June or December to December, so they will adjust later. And I know the school has done that in past years where they've actually ended up with more money in the reserves they needed and they rolled the millage rate down. I know they did that in 2018. Any questions just on how that's calculated?
Can you just repeat that number? You said that the increase that went up across the board, the average was
13.47 average. Now, you got to realize it was probably higher if you lived near Winterville and toward Clark County. There's a lot more sales there.
Don't forget the appeal balls.
Huh?
Appeal balls.
Well, yeah. And then the other thing is if you live down near Wilkes County or you're back over in the Glade, it probably didn't go up as much. But it's going to vary based on, is it timber property, is it pasture land, is it, you know, what's the soil type? Every soil type is a different rate, a different value. So.
I live in Stevens. I haven't even had a selling house in my property since 2012. No one came that I'm aware of. Yet my home went up in value $183,000. What was that based on?
Current market value.
Where? Sold one house that I know of in 10 years.
Yeah, and that I don't have. Kim would have that, GMAS has that sales value, but I can tell you, I've got one property that I've owned for a long time. It had not changed since 2008. Trust me, in 10 years, when they adjusted it this time, it nearly doubled, and it was real close to doubling. The other property I bought in 13, and it went up 20-something% in the last 6 years. So, and I believe that one actually is very accurate. The other one I'm looking into now to see how it compares to other local properties and things. So, mine went way up.
And 48. Farmland.
Yeah, most.
Negating the house.
Yeah, most of mine is farmland. That one is a farm, and it went up. It nearly doubled. And the house was not the biggest part of it.
Trust me, I'm not making 48.4% more on the farm.
Yeah. So, yeah. The other thing to look at is when you look at your tax bill, number one, remember you need to appeal by the 18th of July. That you need to get the appeals in. But the other thing is check your square footage, be sure it's correct. Check the other category. Do you have a barn? Has the barn been removed? You know, do you have a pool? Is there a pool on there, but you don't own a pool? So be sure anything of that nature is correct. The other thing we'll look at is if you're over 62, there are exemptions. Some of those are income-based. Some of them are based on if you're a surviving spouse of a military personnel. There's some things like that to definitely look at because those are other exemptions you may qualify for. And if you need to look those up, it's Title 48, Chapter 5, covers all the tax law there.
Agricultural exemptions too.
Right, and your farm exemptions fall under that. If you've got a timber exemption or if you have an agricultural conservation easement, those are also filed. Be sure those are filed.
Tracy, there have been mentions of soil type. According to classifications of the property, it's classified according to soil type. When would these soil types take? When did the state or the county or whoever take soil sample?
Well, they're updated every few years, and you know we look at those based on the soil maps that are produced, and they're done statewide, you know, for each county. So
When did they do? Is that the USGG?
Yeah.
USDA.
USDA?
USDA.
Is that the helicopter flying?
Well, I want to have Ken answer, do one more thing, and then we're going to overall ask all the questions, and we'll come around with the microphones. So Ken, if you would, just kindly explain, since the mill rate's been briefly, everything's briefly been explained, but would you explain just the appeal process briefly, and then we'll start with general questions.
And Stan really touched on it. You know, we encourage you to appeal. If you feel something's not right about your property values, certainly come in. Be glad to take a look. We're there 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And does everybody know where our office is? We are down the hall from the tag office. So Sheila's office is on one end of the building, we're on the other end.
This is Ken Caldwell, our chief appraiser, by the way.
And, you know, we'll be glad to help you with that. But the appeals process is very simple. Just a one page that you check a couple of boxes, state your value. You do have to have a value in mind, and you do have to put that value on the paper. And then any supporting documentation you can attach, any comments you may have, there's a place for that. Sign it, date it. It really takes 2 or 3 minutes, tops. But I do want to touch on what Stan mentioned earlier. We're seeing a lot of people come in and appeal, and they put down their reason is I'm on a fixed income, or you know, it went up 50% in 1 year. Those are not really going to hold any water when you try to argue your case. So, you know, have an idea of what you want to say, a reason for your appeal, other than just I'm on a fixed income. I know a lot of people on fixed incomes. I've got parents and aunts and uncles here in the county that lived here all my life, and that's really something that as a human being I can sympathize with, but you know, with this appraisal process, it really has no barrier. So, but we'll be glad to help you anytime you want to come back. If you just want to take a look, you may not even want to appeal. We can look at your property, and we do have the current values in our system there. So I would remind you that if you look online, you're looking at 2018 values. So if you see your assessment notice is at 200,000, and your neighbor's got a similar property, and he's at 100,000 on wine, don't jump up and have a cow because that was last year's value for him versus your value for this year. So make sure we're comparing the correct year.
And I'm happy as a broker to help anybody. If you want more details other than I want to pay my taxes, if you need me to help you find comps in the community that sold, or look through your tax assessment report, I can help you understand that. If you need my help, I'm happy to help. And I can hand out a card, I don't mind. I'm here to help people understand it, and if you then feel like you have a right to appeal it, then by all means, the more details you have, the better case you'll have to get your appeal. I'm happy to help anybody.
Can I ask a question?
Well, I will say, I did go down last week and use with Kim, and he was very informative. I learned some things I didn't know, and I think there are things that probably the board, I suggested should print in the paper, state mandate that we have to meet, that if we don't meet, we will be able to lose taxation, if I understand correctly, on our public utilities. So there's a ratio there, so I did not make him put on the football helmet that he carried down there and the turtle shell to strap to his butt with my boots that I had on that day. But I do appreciate your help. But there's some things that I think we need to consider, and I know we have to set millage rates and things like that, but this is a big burden. If my millage rate doesn't go down, and even if it goes down, it still could be increases. I know our property taxes are going to go up $1,750. I live in Orlandville. I guess that's close to Clark County. It makes me more important with a 59% increase on one property and 69% on the other. But I'm fortunate that in the business I'm in, which is insurance, I have access to go online and do evaluations for home sales. A lot of the people in the county that want to appeal do not have access. They don't know how to look up that information. And I guess the way I feel right now, a lot of us feel is it's kind of like we are guilty until we're proven innocent. You know, my question would be is that, you know, the appraisal company went out, they did a mass appraisal. we're at a disadvantage. What specifically did you use to say that my property is worth that much? Where are you collecting that data? I mean, are you doing it by just saying my house is 2,500 square foot and a house in Clark County or whatever else sold for $2,500 or what? Because if you go and look at recent sales that I looked at, I didn't really see a whole lot that would be comparable. And I think a lot of the rest of the citizens are going to be the same way. Where's all this information that you're pulling coming from, and how are you assessing it to each individual property?
All right, to answer a couple of questions, we use sales within the county. We didn't go outside of the county, with the exception of maybe some of the industrials, but I don't think we even did with the industrials because it wasn't but a couple. But all the sales that we used to appraise the properties on the market approach came from within the county. We have access to all the multiple listing services, CoStar. We have subscriptions to that, which have all of the commercial lease information, sales, listing information. So we have all the data, like Kim said, is in his system. I mean, it was submitted and it's housed in the assessor's office. We don't keep it. It's your data. So all the analysis and values are there.
What was the line of sales from 2019 to 2018 in comparatively? Like the line of sales that you did this evaluation on compared to the line of sales from...
Can I throw up a graph?
Yes.
Because I don't know that it's in the papers here.
While you're pulling that graph up, one of the things that drove the mass appraisal across the county, they've mentioned a couple of things about the ratios. The Department of Revenue, and really it's the Department of Accounting and Audits, requires that the sales ratio, that when sales are made, that the tax ratio be between 36 and 44%. And that's based on that 40% assessment. If that gets below 38%, they start penalizing you on your taxation of utility properties. If it gets below 36%, you get a notice from the state that says you're out of compliance, and we're going to start fining you if you don't get it back in compliance. And we got that notice last year. I think it came in, or earlier this year?
In May.
In May, okay. So our ratios were out, and that's one thing that drove the mass appraisal is we knew we were already at close to 36%, and it needed to get back into ratio so that we're in compliance. And the difference there, to give you an idea, if you're 38%, you automatically get to tax utilities at the 40% ratio. If you're below that, you get to tax them at whatever that amount is. So if you're at 36, you get 36, you just lost 4% of the appraised, not the appraised, but the assessed value on your utilities.
That can be a huge chunk of money.
Tracy, so now that it's gone up, are we going to see an increase on utility bills in addition because that tax is going into the county tax? That's going to go up based on that ratio rate, right?
I can't speak for the utility companies. I've never looked into their budgets. If it is, it's probably a year ahead. I'm sure they factor that into their costs somehow.
Well, it's on every bill. You have the county fee for the tax based on whatever the bill was.
Yeah, they should calculate it 40% all the time, and then if they don't get billed at 40%, they get an earnings on that. That's a positive.
Unless your median ratio falls below 38%.
Which it has been.
Yeah, that's right.
So we now believe we're going to see an increase in utility.
Correct. You can assess those utility properties at 40%, which is a big.
And that's a lot of money. Yes,
So
sir.
how, I guess the main thing that upsets most of the people, how did we fall into the rut of letting it go 13 years without?
Exactly.
I can take the blame for that one.
No.
You know, as long as we're in compliance with the state, 2006 we did a reval countywide. Okay, we raised values. If you remember 2008, the bottom fell out of the economy. Nothing was selling. Okay,
9, 10, 11, the state put a moratorium on the freeze, we couldn't raise values. So we basically just had to leave it alone. 2012, sales still weren't coming back here in Oglethorpe County, and the board decided to, just across the board, rather than pay and have a countywide revow, to lower the values, which would really make not a whole lot of sense, just to go in and lower the house values 10% base cost and 10% on the land values. And we did that in 2012. So basically, the last adjustment that was made was a decrease. And so 2 or 3 years later, sales started picking up. Well, we were still, you know, in compliance. We were still well within our range. 2017, we noticed that we had dipped below 38, which was costing us the utilities. And that's when we decided, you know, we need to look at doing a revaluation, bumping our figures up to keep up with sales. And so we started this with GMAS last summer. And so 2018, we got the report for 2018 on May 31st of this year that showed that we were below 36. And we were the only county in the state that was below 36. And I've got the report here if anybody wants to see it, but we were right on time with having to do that. But again, you know, you can blame me in my office, I guess, for that, but you know, we were trying to keep our numbers low, but within, you know, the reasonable range. And so, but the sales have really taken off, last couple of years especially. And even now, I hate to say it, we're seeing sales now that are starting to outstrip even the new values. And I don't know how long that can continue. I'm worried that we're going to wind up doing, you know, the same situation all over again. But, you know, we have to keep up. The state says we have to keep up, and that was part of the reasoning behind having GMAS under contract for what we call a maintenance agreement, for them to come in and help us, you know, look at every piece of property every 3 or 4 years, keep those values bumped up as they need to be, kind of avoid this situation again. So,
Yeah.
There's a
One more question, please. So the 9 aspects of property values, farmland, agricultural, are they given equal weight?
equal weight?
Yeah.
Well, it's based on the amount of acreage that you have.
So
in
you
each-
no, but you got the 9 things that are checked. Soil type, yada, yada, yada. Are those 9 given equal weight and evaluation?
Well, they're different values. They're valued differently. For example, a 1 classification is going to be your top producing soil. I'm sorry?
Can you give me those percentages?
We can show you that at the office. I can show you how that's grouped.
Because then I can take that number and the number of acres.
9 is basically underwater, yeah.
So I can take those 9 values, given the weight that you give them, and back out an acre. And then everything should be equal. My farm, the farm across the road, the farm up the road, correct?
In each category.
Right.
I'm taking a sum of the 9 categories.
If you've
there's a
got
multiple regression model.
Yeah.
We can give you all of that.
oh yeah.
I can deal with that.
So all your class 1 should be the same, like your class 2 should be the same.
Yeah. So if we have the same numbers,
Right.
or I can adjust those numbers by this percentage, the
Yep.
value should be exactly equal.
Right, because, you know, if you've got 100 acres and most of it is open land 3,
Scrub weeds, yeah.
well, let's say open land 3, and I've got 100 acres and most of it is wooded 8,
Yeah.
naturally that's going to be a difference, a pretty
Well,
big difference.
I can tell you that in 2018, the farm up the road that's open land and irrigated was a lower value than mine.
Okay. Well, they need to come by the office and I'll be glad to look at it. I'll be glad to look at it.
Stan, would you go ahead and go over the line of sales so we can have
Yeah.
an opportunity to look at that?
This is going back to what Kim was explaining about their ratio.
Correct.
The ratio is that audit study that the state does comparing the county to where they at market, compared to market value. And I know that's probably hard to see, but this white line represents their median ratio. If the property sold for $100,000 and the county had it appraised for $100,000, that would be this green line here. This green line represents the actual sale price of the property. This white line represents the county's assessment on those properties. The red lines here, between 36 and 44%, is the Department of Revenue's threshold. We can't be below 36% or above 44% on the assessments. However, if we're below 38, that gets into the situation where the county and the taxing authorities can't assess the public utility at 40%. So even if they're assessing all the other properties at 38, 36%, they can still assess the public utilities at 40. But anyhow, you can see the graph here. This indicates the market value of properties. Now this goes back from 2013, 14, 15. It's like Kim was saying, the values were still declining. They probably dropped to the bottom back in 2012. Well, 2015. And they're just now coming back up. No. 2012. The values started coming back up. This is the assessment. So the graph is kind of reversed. But the assessments went below what the selling prices started. And this is when we done our reassessment, trying to get it back to fair market value. They indicated the state's audit study was below the 36 threshold, which is the only county at the time in 2018. Another graph was indicated on the current market. These are two different graphs. This goes from 2013 to 2018, and this is just a number of sales, average home sales, or no, all home sales. The number of home sales. This doesn't indicate anything of value. It's just the number of transactions has increased from in 2013 from around 60 to 2018. We had nearly 120 home sales. Currently, we were tracking list to sales ratio, what people place their properties on the market versus what they sell for. Typically, prior to 2018, that was 95% or less, sometimes 90%. But this is 2 years worth of tracking that. Out of 115 samples, there was a 99% list to sale ratio. That indicates a pretty good market. Also, this is the actual value of sales. This is all average home sales from 2013 to 18, and this is value. It ranges from $100,000 to $180,000. So you can see value-wise, the number of transactions and the list to sale ratios, their job is pretty difficult. They have to mirror the market every year. The law says you're supposed to assess all property at fair market value every year. Well, you should reassess every year, but that's nearly impossible for a staff of 3 to reappraise the entire county every year.
Right.
And believe me, it's harder to go down than it is back up. The assessors are always a year behind. We're looking at properties that sold last year to send out your notice this year. You're getting it now and looking at things now when we use transactions that occurred in 2017 and 18. He's talking about next year's assessment notice because they're having to go ahead and enter deeds that's occurred since January. He's already got an idea of what the market's doing from now, or since we've done the reappraisal to now. There's already an indication that it needs to be increased somewhat more.
Excuse me, did I understand you earlier to say that if you miscalculated the size of my house, that's a valid reason for a reassessment?
Yes, sir, absolutely. Any factual information that's incorrect, we need to get that correct first. And that can be corrected at any time. If it's a factual error.
Correct.
Absolutely. And we're human. Look, we had, at one time, we had 6 folks in the field, 3 folks in the office, and you're 3 folks. There were several people involved. There's going to be human error, data entry, calculations. So I'm not going to promise everything is perfect. Because too many people. If it was all computers, maybe.
This is just a real quick question. If you win at the Board of Appeals, how long is your property tax fixed? And if you win at the Superior Court, how long is that property tax?
This year and 2 preceding years. So it's locked for 3 years. Unless you, for 3 years. So if you win or get your value, I don't want to say win because it's not a win-lose. We're not in there to win. If the Board of Equalization establishes a value that's not the assessor's value, whether it's your value or a value they come up with, somewhere in between, that value is locked in for the assessors. You're assessed on that value for this year and the 2 preceding years, unless the taxpayer does something to change that. The Superior Court as well. Same anywhere on that appeals chart after the VOE. From the VOE on, once it gets into the judicial side, that law locks that value in for. Yes, sir.
Can you answer question G on this sheet? How many approved appeals are necessary to initiate a new assessment?
None. I mean, that's, you can have, I mean, that I would imagine at some point, if you had 100% of them appealed, somebody in the state would start asking some questions. But what we were talking about is 8% of the properties that appeal, or the number of appeals have to be less than 8% on the parcel count and value in dispute in order for the revenue commissioner to approve to the tax commissioner that she can, or he can send out tax bills. All right, so it has to be less than 8% of number of parcels and or value in dispute. But that just delays the tax billing, not just submission.
Right, and by approved appeals, it would have had to go all the way through the process.
If you appeal, it's an approved appeal.
Oh.
Yeah, there's no, unless you appeal the property that's not yours, that would be. Yeah, I mean, if you appeal and it's your property, you have all the rights to appeal it, it's certified, it's an appeal. Whether it's on a form, on a piece of paper, it's an appeal.
Okay, thank you.
Kim, I had a question for you. What is the total line of sale value that came in this year? Properties that were actually sold and comparative to last year, like line of sales, they were this amount this year, and what were they last year? Total properties sold. Do we know what the amount was derived from the total amount of real estate that was sold in Oglethorpe County for this assessment? So we can, and do you know what they were last year?
I probably do, but I don't top of my head.
Because I wanted to see what the rate of increase or fluctuation was from comparatively from year to year.
Oh, we don't have that data here. I've got something close that'll give you an idea. Okay. But that data is available. I have to get back up here. I can't see that. I don't know why I didn't look on the screen. This is the median ratio that we were talking about. This is our internal study. So after the reevaluation, there's 192 samples that we used that sold in 2018. 192 samples, we're at 3904 on the median ratio. That's right under 40. Because if you get it 40, you get even more. But we're trying to be under. Plus, we're using a year's older sales. So next year, there's probably going to be smaller incremental increases annually to keep up with the market. As well as going, if the market goes down again, we're going to make those reductions as well. Last year, those same samples, we're at a 29.85. So if you do that percentage, 29.85 versus 39, that's about the rate of change on the assessments, on those sales anyway.
And the other question I had is, if these people are asking me how do they get the comparables, we know that some of this data you need to come in, you need to pull the analysis to get it to be able to come in to have these appeals. I know that your office only has 3 people. Lori has offered to help citizens of the county because they can't just come in and say this is not fair. They have to have evidence to prove their point. And so to get a comparable analysis and if they're having a difficult time getting it on a computer, they're going to have to come to you. But people do not understand some of this process on how to do. So if there's only 3 of you in the office, we need some other people to help in that.
We're on standby. He knows we're on standby. We're willing to help through the appeals process. We're at his beck and call when he says, hey, I've got a line. We'll be down there to help. But we are the appraisers for the county. We're taxpayer servants. That's what we are as employees and contractors of the county. That is our job to do that for you. So when you come in, whether you go through an independent appraiser, a broker, a real estate agent, that's what we're there for. So we'll do that same analysis for you. And if it indicates that we're too high, we'll be the first ones to try to make an adjustment.
And the other question people were asking me to ask you, what is this assessment value coming into? Without any kind of adjustments, what is this looking like bottom dollar that this is going to bring into the county? I mean, just this assessed value of this increase. Do we have a dollar attached to it? Without the millage.
I don't deal with that.
This is coming. Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, you could estimate based on last year's millage rate. And let me say something else. That state form on that assessment notice that you had, that is by law how it has to look. The folks under the Gold Dome designed that and said, that's law, that's what you have to put on. What's deceiving, very deceiving on there, is they don't discuss about that rollback rate form that the taxing authorities are required to do.
Right.
So they don't know what the millage rate is because they don't know what the budgets are. The budgets hadn't been set. The millage rates hadn't been calculated. The estimated tax on that notice is the current assessment based on last year's millage rate. Well, and sir, I agree. State law. I would like to take it off, but that state law is required to be on there.
Hey, I think, it seems to me that, I'm getting lost in all these percentages and ratios, and I even heard you use the term multiple regression, and I wonder how many people here know what multiple regression is. Very few, I would guess, other than myself, and a couple, yeah, sorry.
I promise not to use that in the office.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, I think we're losing sight of it, that what all of us want is just to be treated fairly. That's the basic bottom line. After that, I don't know what else, we could want. Is fair treatment under, equitable and fair treatment under whatever the rules and guidelines are. But it seems to me, you gave us some alternatives if we wanted to appeal the process. And there were such things as, going to the courthouse and checking records, inspecting other property in your neighborhood, inspecting those records, going to places like Zillow and other real estate firms and that sort of thing. And but my question is, and I'm retired, I don't think most of us maybe couldn't do it anyway, but at the same time, that takes a lot of time. And as Steve Ray pointed out, about, it's almost like we're guilty. But I think, again, all any of us want is to just be treated fairly, And I know that you have pointed out something I think most of us didn't realize is this is not our tax bill. Our tax bill is going to come later after the millage rate is established, and they're going to try to equalize it. And I think that actually probably allayed some people's fears, that sort of thing. So anyway, but again, I think all of us, no don't want to get away from the point that we just want to be treated fairly.
I understand, and us as well. I mean, I'm a taxpayer too. I mean, we don't advertise for business. It's all word of mouth. And I promise we don't want nothing but fair and equitable. I mean, we want to help the taxpayers throughout the appeals process. What I was giving examples for is for folks that don't have an idea of what their property values might be, other than the assessment notice that you receive from the county. We try to do our best due diligence, homework, research, and analysis to come up with fair and equitable values. But if you don't have any idea of what your property is worth, I was trying to encourage you to do your own independent analysis, review. If you've got an insurance policy, they'll have, what your house and the sticks and bricks are insured for, not the personal property. But if you've got an appraisal or bank appraisals in the past, that'll give you an indication of that. If it's income producing, we can look at income values. That's what I mean by that. Not that we're trying to cause you more work. I was trying to say, if you thought.
Okay, we're going to just have 2 more questions and then we'll try to.
My name is Russell Rowe, and I live in Lake Oglethorpe. Thank you for doing this tonight. Did you take into consideration infrastructure or lack of it when you did these appraisals? For example,
talking about interior?
No, I'm talking about like internet. There's not even an internet plug for everybody that lives on my road.
That's got to be an economic
I'm on speed dial with the AT&T guy because it works sometimes, but most of the time it doesn't. I'm within a mile of a chicken house that's pretty ranked today. I don't know if it was when you all were there, but do you take those sort of things? Because if she's a real estate agent, I'm sure those are things that people probably say, I don't want to be anywhere near a chicken house. Does the internet work? Do you have cable TV? We don't, and I can't speak for people on the other side of the lake. They have Windstream, and from what I've heard, that's not any better. So are those things?
That's what I have, and no, but those are good, great examples. And no, we did not in the original model. We didn't have any indication. Of course, we didn't know that it didn't happen. But we hope that you put that in your appeal. Oh, I will. And if you could draw us a little map of where that line is.
And we have some very underfunded fire departments here. Ours is an ISO 9, 10 being the worst. So not only that, but my property tax went up 20% when they redrew those lines as well, actually 21%. So 20% here and 37% there and 57% here. After a while, that's a lot of percents. So did you consider that our ISO rating is a 9?
No, sir. That was not in the consideration being covered. Thank you.
I have one question, or 2 questions. When does the clock stop for appeals? How many days left?
July 18th. As long as you get it in the mail by July 18th, you can mail it and be post-dated the 18th.
Okay, the second question, I do that. How long is the new clock before I've got to produce my evidence and that sort of thing?
You'll be
notified. So when if I appeal on July 17th, then I've got to have all the evidence in that envelope?
No.
It would help.
It would help, absolutely.
It would definitely help, but you don't have to put all the evidence and information in that envelope at that time. 45 days to appeal. Once you appeal, it goes back, the ball's back into the assessor's court. Okay. And they have, I believe, 180 days? 180 days to notify you of what their decision is. Of course, we hope that it's not going to take 180 days.
If it takes 180 days.
Basically, I get my name in the pot within by July 18th, even if I don't have all the evidence.
Correct.
Right. But I can come back in before you folks actually do something.
Absolutely.
And provide us additional information, absolutely.
So from the standpoint of uniformity that you were talking about earlier in comps, sorry, I live in a residential property, so I don't think about soil and all that kind of stuff. But what I heard was you took the 192 samples and you looked at comparable, I presume, samples of my square footage and my acreage and everything, and that's what you used for my assessment. That makes sense to me. But earlier, someone said, if I live closer to Winterville, my assessment is higher, potentially. Can you explain if the uniformity, if you're using all the samples in the county and comparing us equally or uniformly, why, because I live on the Arnoldsville side, I can expect a 59% increase?
Well, I didn't make that comment, but I think the gentleman that made that comment meant that for two reasons. Maybe he assumed that in that area, values are higher, property values are higher, houses are selling for more. That could have been one. But the other one would be, is if it's in the city, you've got an additional millage rate. So the taxes would be higher because you've got an additional millage rate if you live within the city limits. That's what
But I'm thinking about it just from the assessment standpoint.
No,
that should be across the board, countywide.
Correct.
Just my size property, my square footage, the general residential parameters.
Now, with the exception of land values, land can fluctuate on a dollar per acre lot value based on the subdivision or the location it's in, but the house itself should be very comparable, regardless.
Hey, okay, is this thing working? So, the city sends out a separate tax bill in addition that nobody's even seen yet. So, you know, you keep saying that the city's included, so it's a higher millage rate, but actually the city sends out separate tax bills separate from the county. Right.
So there's additional taxes.
But it's right, but nobody has seen that.
It's also
additional
included
tax
on the estimate, though. It is on the estimated.
Your tax now is based on the 18 assessments.
I think the tax bills that y'all sent out are from the county. The city tax bills haven't come out, or you included that amount based on the city?
If you look at the assessment notice, the city tax will be at the bottom.
So the total, so that total in the thing is including the
That's including the estimate, yes, sir.
estimate. Okay, thank you.
Hey, I'd like to thank, everybody looks like about ready, most people have left. I just want to say thank you very, very much for this. I mean, literally we did this in 3 days. And pulled this amount of many people, maybe 150 people here tonight. I appreciate everybody showing up, spreading the word, being here. I'll end up one more question, but thank you for these gentlemen to take their time to be here so quickly as well. And I think one thing that this proves is show that we do care in this county what is decided on for us. But I think, and I'm in Colton too, I haven't been there in a while, we need to attend our county commissioners' meetings. We need to show that we stand together to make these decisions. So many decisions are made that we don't even know about. Our Board of Education needs our support. They need our input because when you look at these numbers, it's because we are not present at these meetings. We are not speaking up. We need to stick together and start showing up at these meetings and saying, why is this? If we understand, we can make better decisions. Right now, we're all upset, but this is what we can do in a matter of days, 2 days, 3 days, we put this together, and I appreciate everybody working together to do it. So, again, if you need my help with understanding how to make your appeal, I can help you with details. I can't actually write your appeal, but I can help you understand values and differences, read your report, I'm happy to do that. All right, we have one more question. I want to thank Terry and Stan, thank you so much for coming with us, and Tracy, Norman, thank you, and Ken, I appreciate it. One more question.
Guys, I thank y'all again for having this meeting. I've got several properties, and I want to speak to uniformity and how it could happen. I've got 2 pieces of property divided by a barbed wire fence. One side of that barbed wire fence, it comes to $2,400 an acre. The other side of that barbed wire fence is paid at $15,000 an acre. Is that something that is normal?
You might want to go
That's
see
going to
Ken.
be that'll be appeal, but I wanted to see. I mean, were they done at different times?
Well, there definitely have to be different types of properties because there's no way an agricultural large tract will be valued at $15,000. So the $15,000 an acre tract has to be either a lot in the subdivision or a small.
It is.
So it's a different class and type of property. So it's not the same property.
Not that much.
Right. But it has to be a different type of class.
Who sets the value on the land? Who sets the value on the land?
The market. You guys do. The buyers and the sellers. Absolutely. Correct. It's the folks buying the properties and it's the folks selling the properties.
So my class six property will say, they be worth more than my neighbor's class six property.
It could very well be, depending on where it's at, the location within the county. Again, Kim has all this information. He'd be glad to sit with you. He can show you those imaginary lines, where those base rates change in value, and how those values fluctuate from acreage to class and type.
Say something. You want to say something?
Thank y'all.
Your phone number? I'm trying to get Kim Caldwell to say something. Y'all, say hey. Give him your phone number. I'm just kidding you. The meeting's over. Thank y'all for watching.